Welcome to Mysteries to Die For. I am TG Wolff, and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. All stories are structured to challenge you to beat the detective to the solution. These are arrangements, which means instead of word for readings, I can say that word, you get a performance that's meant to be heard. Jack and I perform these live, front to back, no breaks, no fakes, no retakes, although we're going to do one little fake today. We'll talk about that. This is Season 7, Games People Play. Games are about competition conducted according to rules with participants working toward a goal. Games are a part of every culture and are one of the oldest forms of social interaction and engagement. Games can be fun, challenging, and exhilarating. They can also be intense, cutthroat, and lethal. This season, our authors have fashioned deadly games and unscrupulous villains to test your detection skills. This is episode 24. Rock, Paper, Scissors is the featured game. This is Rock, Paper, Scissors, Shoot by Jack Wolff.
Hello, it's me. What? Okay.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so this is episode 24, and this is Jack's and my favorite detective of all time, Detective Conley.
No offense, other detectives. I'm just better. I mean, Detective Connolly is just better.
So what we're going to do is you all get a treat because Jack is going to read to you this Detective Conley story, which means he is going to have to add his original music in post-production because while he is extremely talented, reading and playing the piano at the same time, well, that's just a little bit beyond your skill set, isn't it?
I'm sure I could do it. I'm just not sure that I could do it well.
That's a good point.
So, yeah.
So with that, I'm going to turn my microphone off and turn the floor over to Jack for Rock, Paper, Scissors, Shoot.
All right, I hope you're ready because I did not bring water up here, so prepare for a lot of coughing. All right. Chapter 1. The Fun in Fungus Mansion. It was a crisp November morning, crispy enough to make me want a double-fried butter stick from the county fair down the road, but I wouldn't be distracted. I had been called to Montana from North Dakota, where I was scouting a new taco bar called Taco Bout, a Good Taco Bar. The name was a work in progress from what I could tell. Anywho, the property I was called to was owned by a rich guy named Daniel Perquis, who had made his fame in trading huitlacoche from Mexico, a kind of corn that is infected with fungus to develop an amazing flavor. I don't know how fungus corn was supposed to make this guy enough money to buy a mansion in Montana, which is why I wanted to see it. A 911 call was made from the house stating that there was a murder that they wanted a detective to come investigate right away. I, of course, intercepted the call, deciding that instead of letting a Montana police officer take care of it, I would make the 9-hour drive over to see a fungus mansion. I'm sure they wouldn't mind waiting. Now, when I arrived, I parked in front of the house the size of 46 large elephants. My bad, fellas. The Baroque-style woodworking made me wonder how I knew what Baroque-style woodworking looked like, and the mile-high windows illuminated the courtyard I sat parked in. A butler approached me with astute posture and a mustache that could tap the shoulder of anyone adjacent to him. "Good evening, sir. My name is Berthrou, and I am pleased to see you here on such urgent matters. I must say that I am most disappointed in the time it took you to arrive, as a terrible murder has taken place." "What kind of murder do you be talking about, Berthie?" I recited with a southern twang. He raised an eyebrow the way only a mustached butler could. "The owner of this here establishment, Daniel Perquis, was shot during a momentary power outage." I gasped. My dream to talk to the great fungus man, it was quenched as quickly as it was sparked. A brew boiled in my stomach. Anger and sadness washed over me, like the oyster and mayonnaise washed over Berthrou as I threw up on him. It was a heavy lunch that day. I'm going to try to laugh less. After Berthrou changed into his other clothing, he escorted me to the seat of the crime. It was a billiards room, which housed a couch, a love seat, and a single rocking chair, and a pool table. The table had a red spew of red liquid across it. It did have a red spew of red liquid across it that heavily resembled blood. I stalked the table, inspecting it, and brought my nose down to the now dried blood. I wouldn't get too close there, detective, sneered Berthrew. Staniel had AIDS. I leaned back and screamed, "Oh my God! I thought Staniel was rich from fungi corn. Are you to tell me he was receiving financial aid? I am inconsolable." "No, sir," the zombie of a butler replied. "AIDS, the STD." Puzzled, I stated, "I didn't know AIDS was a kind of sexually traumatized donkey." Again, "No, sir," he sighed. "The sexually transmitted disease. He picked it up from a chap named Doug in a hot air balloon while vacationing in Thermopolis, Wyoming." "Ah, yes. Well, let's continue then. I see that the body, not the bloody, was moved to where, if I may ask?" Berthrew fidgeted with the buttons on his snappy vests. "He was moved to his bedroom. He made it clear during his life that he wanted to pass away sleeping on his mattress made of kitten fur. He wanted to pass away in the same place his dog died, which happened to be whilst licking his testicles. Fortunately for Mr. Perquis, the testicles were removed." "How unfortunate," I said, sad for the poor little guy. "I feel like we should stop cutting off dog balls." Mr. Perquis agreed, which is why he never cut off his dog's balls. I looked back, confused. "You just said his testicles are removed, though." "I wasn't talking about the dog, sir." "Ew, gross, no. I didn't want to think about that. Instead, I moved on. The billiard room wall had a red wallpaper covered with framed pictures. One picture was crooked, so I went to correct it. It had an image of a young woman on it. She had good posture, but an indifferent expression. I pondered out loud. It seems strange to me that so much of this house is in perfect condition, yet this singular picture is out of alignment. "Good eye, sir," chortled Berthrew. "That is a picture of Eva Ann Paula Hitler, Adolf Hitler's wife. It was behind this portrait that the murder weapon was stored. The weapon was thrown here on the pool table if you would like to inspect it." The gun looked to be pretty standard, a Ruger Mark IV with a silencer attached. I reached for my vinyl gloves and chimed, "I should begin by dusting for prints if possible." "That won't be necessary, sir. There are only 4 people in the room with Mr. Perquis. All of them wore gloves due to a regular power outage that turned off the heating and light. Mr. Perquis was shot during the outage." "I see," I muttered. "And where are these suspects?" "I have escorted them to the property's hangar, where they could each have more space from each other. I would recommend finishing your inspection in this room before interrogating them, sir. Just a suggestion." "Noted," I said while peering around. Mounted on the south wall of the billiard room was a taxidermy deer head, which only had one eye. The empty socket was gross to look at. I lifted all of the couch cushions, found nothing. I even inspected the pool table to see where the balls were located, although they were probably moved when the body hit the table. One ball wasn't accounted for, and I found it on the floor of the corner of the room. It was the 8 ball. It had a small smudge of sticky red blood. I swabbed it. The blood was a slightly different shade than the blood on the table. "Berthrew, was your Big Daddy Staniel injured in any other way other than the gunshot?" "Not to my knowledge, sir," he responded. "Interesting," I muttered, as I placed the ball in a plastic bag and pocketed it. "Alrighty, Bertie, I do believe I am ready to proceed. Take me to your leader," I said in a robotic voice. Bertie shook his head. "Pardon me, sir, but I don't believe Mr. Perquis wanted anyone to gaze upon his body after death. That is why as soon as I discovered that Mr. Perquis was dead, I covered his body to shield it from the onlookers." "Well, dear butler, do you understand that as a detective I need all the facts? I will have to see the body." The butler looked uneasy. "Perhaps in time. For now, let me show you to the hangar so you may interrogate the suspects." I looked stubborn. "I first would like to collect all the facts. How am I to ask all necessary questions if I do not first have all the information? I need to see the body." "Yes, of course, sir." What word did I write? Acquiesced. "It is just down this hall on your left." "Thank you, Berthrew." I knew he would see things my way. I followed the butler to a large double door, which Bertie held open. I walked in to find the most interesting scene, which started with the sound of doors slamming behind me and the sound of a lock clicking loudly into place.
So I love the way Detective Conley's accent keeps changing. I thought only I did that.
Well, his accent depends on how much I remember what his accent's supposed to be. It doesn't help when I write the way he's supposed to be talking after he says something.
Yeah.
Because if I say...
The cue's missing.
Yeah. So, oh well, you know.
Oh well.
It's
entertaining.
All right. Chapter 2, Rock, Paper, Scissors, Shoot. I spun around and tried to turn the handle, knowing it wouldn't budge. Upon failing, I surveyed the situation in front of me. In a metal hanger that was starved of color and hangery things like a plane or tools, sat 4 people tied to chairs that looked to be bolted to the ground. Big slabs of cinder blocks dangled from the electronic clamp with flashing green lights on the ceiling, which looked to be positioned directly over each suspect. While this clearly was some sort of trap, the purpose of it was lost on me. I began to approach the 4, each staring at me wide-eyed with tape covering their mouths. Upon my 4th and a half step, a booming voice echoed over a PA system.
Good evening, Daniel.
That's not what it said.
Good evening, detective.
I nearly pooped myself. Good evening, sire. Out of curiosity, do you happen to know where the restrooms would be? Because I just shit myself. A chuckle bounced off the walls.
Very humorous you are. I called you here today to solve a mystery for me. Really, I just need you to double-check my work, as I have already deduced who the killer is.
I analyzed the room and found security cameras all around the hangar. The mystery man didn't seem to want to be anywhere in this room. I began warily pacing. Alright, well, if you already know who the killer is, why don't you hand them over and let the rest of these people go? Again, laughter filled the chamber. It was actually boosting my ego. I know I'm funny, but I didn't think I was laugh out loud level funny, just by asking to let the hostages go. I was impressed with myself.
No, my naive little man,
the voice said, sounding equally impressed with me.
All parties here are guilty of something, and none can be let free unless you solve this little murder with one extra step.
As a child, my brother and I argued constantly. It was incessant, and my mother hated it. So as a solution, every time we fought, she had us play a round of rock, paper, scissors. Not 2 best out of 3, you had 1 shot to win. Today, I will give you the same trivial shot. Each of these suspects have been assigned one of 3 options to play. You have to figure out which option they were assigned and lose to them. There will be no repeats. Only 1 person is rock, 1 is paper, and 1 is scissors. If you tie with them or you win, they will be crushed by the cinder block hanging over their head. If they lied to you, they will be crushed by a cinder block. If you try to free them, they and the others will be crushed. If they try to hint to you which option they were assigned, they will be killed. I inspected the suspects and stated an inquiry, but there are 4 of them and only 3 options as to which position they can play, rock, papers, or scissors.
Indeed,
the voice boomed. The 4th person takes the last option. The game is performed by saying rock, paper, scissors, shoot. You must figure out who our shooter is. Who killed Staniel Perquis? You may remove the tape and interrogate them. They were assigned their options based on their story.
Begin.
I suppose now was a good time as any to start. The 4 suspects had their names written on a name tag on their chairs. From left to right was a man named Cragley Beoff, then Ann Tollers, Dion Mustard, and lastly, Timothy Bobberts. To get a full picture, I decided to interrogate them individually. I removed the tape from their mouths and began. Hello, my name is Detective Connolly, and with any luck, we will all be out of here alive. Without that luck, this will be like when my nephew stomped on all those juice boxes. Red, messy, and sticky. First, I want to introduce yourselves to me. I looked at the far left. Cragley, how do you know Staniel? With a gruff voice and a British accent, Cragley grumbled, "Oh, you see shit, I can't do a British accent. I should not have written this like this." What does Gordon Ramsay sound like? Idiot sandwich, is that right? I am a chef for Mount Eternity, and I prepare meals for all the staff and residents of this here mansion. I stopped him. What's Mount Eternity? This is Mount Eternity, he snapped at me. It's the name of this property, you blockhead. I was aghast. Well, no need to be crude, Craggles. It was just a question. Cragley shook his head disappointedly. I cooked Stan's meals and worked for the man. He paid me well and I fed him. I nodded. And what did you do before that? He grumbled on. Out of school, I joined the military as a marksman. I toured in different war zones before being honorably discharged. My son was killed and I became useless to the army. I could barely get out of bed. Interesting, but not death-worthy in my opinion. How do you go from that chef at a place, or how do you go how do you go from an army man to a chef at a place like this? Cragley attempted to crack his back as he continued. I toured around London and eventually stumbled across a man who claimed to know how my son died. He said it was a drug deal gone wrong. I didn't know my son was mixed up with that crowd in the first place. I tracked down people, and as I did, I got angry. I would get information and then slit throats. I became known as the Black Knight around then, as dealers were dropping like flies because of me. I regret it, of course. Those people were mothers and fathers whose families would be ruined from it. So I just created people that would turn out like me, so I left. I put my knives to good use, cutting brisket instead of skin, and eventually landed this job through a contact I had in my Black Knight days. I have taken a lot of life. I shot people in Vietnam and sliced others in the streets of Piccadilly. I reeled, hoping my other suspects wouldn't be so damn depressing. Did you ever find your son's killer? He shrugged. Towards the end of it all, I stopped asking questions and just killed on sight. One of them might have been the culprit. I could have killed him years before I stopped looking and not even realized. I don't know. Moving on, I had hoped the next lady wouldn't be so drab. "Hello," I said cheerily, trying to brighten the mood. "Tell me about yourself, Anne." Anne looked pale, and I couldn't tell if that was her complexion or if the soul left her body as a child and she was just a walking husk. She wore expensive jewelry, covering herself in diamond necklaces, bracelets, rings, and a studded dress, and even sparkling shoes. "I'm Anne, and I was Stan's accountant," she said shakily, her eyes looking at the cinder slab. The situation clearly bugged her more than it did the war veteran Cragley. "Well, Anne, you're very sparkly for an accountant. Do you mind telling me a little bit about yourself?" "Of course." That's not how she said it. "Of course," she said, still vibrating with fear. "I handled Mr. Perquis's finances personally and took care of his papers." Why is she British too? "I handled Mr. Perquis's finances and took care of his papers. I started working here a couple years ago, just after my mother got sick. My brother came to look after her so I could take this job. We needed the money, and my brother was just working at a Wendy's, so it seemed smart for me to work at a big fancy place like this while he watched her. I send my mom letters all the time. The internet isn't great here, so letters work best for communicating with her." I sympathized. "That's so sweet. When my Aunt Hunky was sick, I sent her squirrels I ran over with my car. She always loved a good snack, and her squirrel jerky was to die for. She could jerkify it over a dumpster fire, then add that little sulfury flavor. Delectable." And somehow whitened even more upon hearing this, and I swear she was about to turn clear. I patted her shoulder and was about to continue down the line, and then something strange happened. I thought to myself, what if there was a chapter break right now? What would I even call it, when all I have to do is get background information on the other two suspects? Chapter 3, The Other Two Suspects. Well, that works well enough. Continuing on, I came across Dion Moosterd. "Greetings, Dion. I feel like being your buddy. Do you feel like being mine?" I don't know why I came at him with a different approach, but he seemed apprehensive of my existence. "Come on, honey. Talk to me. Don't be so hot and spicy." Dion didn't seem to have the spirit. He was avoiding eye contact and clearly was hiding something personal to him. Perhaps he needed more persuasion. "Are you a mustard kind of guy?" Dion rolled his eyes, whole grain style. I am running out of good mustard puns, so I apologize. "Dion, if you don't talk, you will die first. Even if you are the murderer, you can still make it out of here alive if you work with me." Cautiously. "Fine," Dion said. "I was the FBI's informant on Stan. I was undercover for Stan, trying to see what the FBI knew about Stan's more illicit business dealings." "What kind of dealings did he partake in, if I may ask?" Dion looked at the other suspects, then back to me. "Stan didn't just import huitlacoche. Many of the corn husks actually contained cocaine." "Drugs," I thought. "What a coincidence." I glanced over to Cragley, who was staring holes into the side of my head before quickly averting his gaze. I went back to Dion. "Well, I must ask, what are you doing here? If I were you, I would want to stay as far away from Stan as to not implicate my relations with him." He squirmed, as much as he could, tied to the chair. "Stan summoned me back. He said he had some business to discuss. We were about to have our meeting tomorrow, but he ended up shot and dead. I don't know what he wanted to talk about." Something still seemed off. "Are you sure you didn't know?" "I'm sure," he said, just as shakily as before. I moved on. "All right, well, what kind of work did you do for the FBI?" He melted a little, a small sign of relief. "I specialize in decrypting. I examined messages in and out of Mount Eternity. While I was supposed to decrypt everything, I just let them slide and made false reports of no hidden messages. Basically, my job was just paperwork." I see. And did you like your job? I asked. Were you safe?
No.
Dion sounded defeated. The job paid well, but everywhere I looked, Stan's operations was falling apart. Shipments were seized, dealers were caught, and the FBI was getting closer. Stan's time was running out. I looked into Dion's soul. Did you want out? There is no way out, he said. Not while staying hidden, that is. Dion needed time to process what he just admitted, so I moved to the final man, Timothy. Timmy's hair was matted down on the left side of his head, and drops of blood were dried to the side of his face. Timmy, you doing okay? That looks pretty painful. What happened? Timmy looked defeated and worn. He fought to lift his head to look at me, and it seemed that every movement was full of agony, like me after having Indian food for dinner. I don't want to talk about it, he said. I chuckled. Well, if you don't talk about it, then you'll be squished like a cat under the 400-pound man who lives in the apartment above me. At least tell me about yourself. Tim groaned in pain, but talked. I'm Stan's drug runner. I distributed the coke to dealers across Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Colorado, and sometimes Tacoma, Florida, if my favorite food truck is in town. Wait, I said, let me guess. If it's in Tacoma, then the truck is probably Relish My Radish. Tim smiled. Yes, I love a good horseradish and relish Rocky Mountain oyster from the swamp state. They also buy copious amounts of white gold. We laughed for a second, then remembered that 4 people could die at any moment. Back on topic, tell me a little bit about yourself. Do you have any hobbies? Tim lightened up a little bit more. Yeah, actually, I collect replica versions of knives used by Australian crocodile hunter Crocodile Dundee. Interesting, I said. Well, we all have to have something, I suppose. Tim shrugged. Oh, yes. Don't you want to ask about the murder scene though? If you figure out who the murderer is, then that immediately narrows down what the rest of us are. I laughed. Is that your way of trying to say that you aren't the murderer? And I can't ask about that yet anyway. Why? Tim asked. Because that happens in the next chapter, not this one.
There's a lot going on in this.
It would help if I read the script correctly.
Well,
Yeah.
easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a couple letters missing. I didn't notice that.
That got cleaned up for the anthology.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
That was the next step after this. So yeah, the word he was just the letter E, and that threw Jack a little bit.
I was like, eh. There's no way I just wrote eh. I might have just wrote eh. I probably did. All right. Chapter 4, Murder Scene. What chapter? Asked Tim. This one, I responded. Okay, it's time. Let us paint ourselves a picture of the murder. Transport me to 10 hours ago when Stan got shot. I waited for someone to start talking, but no one did. I sighed and plopped my hands against my pants. All right, fine, I'll do it myself. So, there we are in the billiards room. Where was everyone? Anne piped up. I arrived second after Tim. Stan had called us because he likes to play 8 o'clock pool. He does that kind of thing a couple times a week. Tim was standing in the corner, not talking to anyone, and he almost seemed like he was hiding. I shifted my gaze to Tim. Buddy, what happened? Tim refused to look me in the eye. I decided to go on and circle back when more information was gathered. Okay, fine. Moving on. Anne, where were you once you entered the room? I sat on the love seat, she said. I didn't know what had happened to Tim, so I stayed away. I didn't play pool, so I remained seated until we left. Allegedly, that is. I didn't say that out loud, I just thought it. Perhaps she got up to retrieve the gun during the power outage. I made some mental notes of the scene and continued. All right, who entered next? Crackley piped up, grumbling in his British accent. Crap. I came in and picked up a cue. That's Australian. Whatever, he's Australian now. I came in and picked up a cue. I went to start the game with Stan, but we couldn't find the 8-ball. I tried to look for it, but Stan barked to let it be and just play. I didn't sit down until I was tied to this chair by the house servants. That explained how the hostages ended up in the chairs. I straightened up. All right, Dion, you entered lastly. Dion gulped. Yeah, I sat on the couch, and like Anne, didn't move until the bullet was lodged into him. I thought that was rather graphic for no reason, but I had to move on. Okay, so the lights go out, but why? Tim looked up to the ceiling and the cinder block above him. The Montana mountains separate us from civilization, so Mount Eternity has its own power source. It's a massive generator on the south side of the property. The problem is, the generator was sized to support just the house, not the extra commodities that Stan has added over the years. The generator can no longer sustain a Mount Eternity 24/7, so it turns off sometimes. It usually shuts down around 8 after the lights have all been on for a few hours and the temperature drops. It's why we all wear gloves. The mansion is a bitch to heat, and it doesn't help that the heating will just randomly turn off in the power outage. I made more notes, so the killer knew the lights would go off right around 8 when Stan had his regular pool game. Alright, so the lights turn off, and someone goes to the gun hidden behind the portrait of Hitler's wife. It has a silencer on it, and the killer shoots Stan in the back. How does no one notice? Silencers aren't exactly silent, they just aren't deafening. Did nobody hear it? Anne started up again. Oh, we heard it, which is why Cragley started fumbling around for the emergency lantern we keep in every room. It took him a minute, but once it turned on, Stan was dead, and everyone was in the same place that we were before the blackout, except for Cragley, who got up to get the lantern. If someone did get up, they would have had enough time to get the gun, kill Stan, and return to where they were. With every answer came another question, so I asked, if you were all blinded by the darkness, how could the killer see where they were going? How didn't they bump into anyone, and how did they know where Stan was? I posed the question, but as no one had an answer, I had to find my own conclusions. Perhaps, I suggested, they had practiced. Maybe they knew where they would be seated before the night even began, and had rehearsed the murder. Maybe they just had to hope no one stole their spot, or maybe they entered the room early to claim their seat. Perhaps they tried to memorize where Stan was while the light were on. There is a possibility that the entire scenario was a huge gamble, and it just happened to work out perfectly. Only the killer can tell us, and we will find them in time. For now, what happened after the lights were turned back on? Dion decided to contribute to the conversation. Once the lights turned on, we were all shocked. We must have made noises because Berthrew, the butler, seemed to instantly appear. He draped his jacket over Stan and had the mansion staff take us out to our rooms, except they took us here, overpowered us and tied us to chairs instead. This was all I needed. Only 2 questions remained. Oh, Mr. Omnipotent voice coming from the speakers, who are you? The PA system crackled back to life.
I am the mastermind, the victim, the killer, and the innocent bystander. I had my suspicions and watched a man die to find my killer. Now play your predictions and see who lives.
Okay, but one other question, I insist. How do we know the butler didn't do it? He seemed to be right on the other side of the door. He could have opened the door, gotten the gun, killed Stan, and then left. His appearance seems predetermined. The voice responded.
Stan was a paranoid man. He allowed every door hinge in his mansion to creak, so that he would know any time a door opened. If Berthrew had opened the door, the suspects would have heard. The wall between Berthrew and Stan was solid. There was no way into the room other than the door. Do not suspect Berthrew. He is merely a cog in another person's plan. Now play the child's game with your suspects, or they die. You have 5 minutes until the cinder blocks drop.
Now we're up to the deliberation.
Before we get into that, I'm going to remind everybody that Mysteries to Die For remains ad-free, and in exchange for not making you hit the fast forward button, support our authors by checking out their backlists or picking up a title. This week is my co-host and co-creator, Jack Wolff. All of the Detective Conley's lunatic stories, and I believe this is the 3rd one.
I believe so as well.
Are featured in Mysteries to Die For, the season anthologies, seasons 5, 6, and this one, season 7. The nickels and dimes from our book really do support the podcast sales, and they keep Jack. Well, what are you into, Jack?
I don't really know. I've been just trying to pass finals, man.
Keeps me in coffee beans.
Apparently, I don't drink coffee. It tastes like, I don't know, dirty bean water.
Stop it.
What?
It's that dirty bean water.
It's a little bit, strictly speaking.
Not when you add the right stuff to it.
Okay, it's milky, dirty bean water. All right, let's get into the deliberation. Detective Connolly is in over his head, more than usual. If he doesn't get this right, some innocent heads will be squashed. Let's review who was in the room with the late Mr. Staniel Perquise. First, Ann Toller, the bling-loving accountant. Cragley Beath, the former British Army who turned Australian apparently, sharpshooter, turned chef. Dion Mooster, the informant for the FBI, who mostly informed for Stan, and Timothy Bobberts, the drug runner with a bleeding problem. Now let's look at the facts. But if you don't remember, Timothy Bobberts is like bleeding from the side of his face. That's why he has a bleeding problem. But that's probably mentioned in the facts, so I should just shut up and read it. Staniel Perquise, the king of the fungus corn, died in his mansion named Mount Eternity, surrounded by his faithful employees. At the time the lights went out, Cragley and Stan were playing pool. Tim was standing in a corner by himself, sucking up a head injury. Anne and Dion were sitting on the couches. Why? This isn't the story. I don't have to talk like that. When the lights went out, someone retrieved the murder weapon hidden behind the only askew picture frame and shot Stan. Berthrew entered immediately, covering his employer's body with his coat. Anne lived at Mount Eternity doing her work as an accountant with the shaky internet service. It was so unreliable, she'd taken to writing letters to her sick mother. Cragley also lived at Mount Eternity, working as the chef. The ex-army sharpshooter turned his knives to culinary purpose after rampaging the world in search for his son's killers. Dion stayed close to Staniel, a necessary part of snooping for the FBI, and encounter snoop for Stan. He's a counter snoop for Stan. That's what it was, counter snoop. Timothy traveled, distributing. Wow. I can't read today, guys. It's not good because that's my only job here. Timothy is a distributor for Stan's more exclusive products across the Mountain State and Florida, where he has a food truck, Craving. That being Florida. Each suspect was assigned a position, rock, paper, scissors, and shoot, based on their story. Who should Connolly tag as the shooter? So, fun story. I wrote this a long time ago. I don't remember.
You don't remember?
No, I don't.
I edited this 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I remember bits and pieces, but not like the whole thing.
I don't want to guess because I have a specific suspect in my mind who I think did it.
That's really awesome that the author is guessing at its own story.
I feel the need to scroll down just to see if I'm right.
He's scrolling, guys. He's scrolling to see who did it on his own story.
I had it right if it makes you feel better. I think I did, actually. I'm just seeing one name pop up a lot, so I'm assuming it's that one.
Okay, let me take a guess because I kind of...
Okay, go for it.
I need your list.
You need my list?
I need the list.
Okay.
Okay, I am going to go for the... I'm going to go for Dion Mooster.
Dion Moosterd?
The informant of the FBI.
Okay.
And for Stan.
Now, if I remember, I also, it's not in the deliberation. I probably should have gone back and added. That's my fault, fellas. But the way that they were standing in the billiards room, Timothy is bleeding in the corner, I believe near the, whatchamacallit.
Oh, you just said in the corner. You didn't specify.
In the corner.
Which of the four corners
he's
of the
quivering in
room.
a corner.
He's quivering in a corner, bleeding.
And Taller is sitting down.
On a couch.
And then, was it Cragley and Dion? Were they both playing pool?
No, just Cragley was playing
pool. Where was
Stan.
Dion?
He was sitting on a couch.
He came in last. There's a love seat and a couch.
So, wait, he came in last. So maybe it wasn't Dion. So, Cragley came in first. Then,
Timothy was already in there. And then Anne came in. Then Cragley. And then Timothy. No, Dion.
I don't think it's Timothy.
Why is that?
Because he was cowering in the corner and he was bleeding. I think he got
that. Seems like perfect motive, doesn't it?
Not cowering, and this was premeditated. Like somebody planted that gun.
Yeah, maybe getting beat wasn't premeditated.
Yeah, that's true. Getting beat wasn't premeditated.
Maybe he was cowering because of that, and then it pushed him even further. I'm going to shut up.
I think Cragley turned the corner when he, walked away from his vigilantism. So I don't think it was him.
But remember, Cragley has a thing against drug dealers, and Staniel's a big drug dealer.
Oh, I forgot that part.
And he used to be a sharpshooter. He's now turned his shaft. He turned in his guns for knives.
A long time ago, he's like a knives guy. Mm-hmm. Anne doesn't seem to have any skills towards knives or guns or obvious reason to have animosity against Stan. I'm still gonna go for Dion mostly because I feel like you like gaming it. I'm going to pick him because I don't have a reason.
Wow, I see how it is. All right.
See how much you like it. You're like,
This is the final chapter. Rock, paper, scissors, shit. With my mental notes in hand, I began my deductions as quickly as possible. Dion, you worked for the FBI as a decryptor. What kind of messages were sent towards you that were supposed to be checked? Dion was panicking. I did text, emails, phone calls, I interjected. What about letters through the mail? Yeah, he said, I was supposed to, but the only thing I got stuff sent was, Anne's letters to her mom. Bills for property taxes, loans, and other stuff like that. Nothing crazy. I laughed triumphantly. Just as I suspected. You say that Stan's business was dying. How was the FBI finding Stan's shipments? Dion shook his head. I don't know. They couldn't have been getting information from our messages. I let them all go through without decrypting them. I shot over to Anne. Unless the messages were going to another FBI agent, those letters to your mother, Anne, were they really going to your mom? Anne swallowed hard, but didn't bulge. I snapped and yelled, Come on, Anne! What matters more, betraying a dead guy or getting out of here alive? She gave in. Fine, I couldn't do it. Stan was killing people across the nation with his drugs. Just look at what it did to Crackley's son. I was sending information about Stan's finances to a contact. He would figure out who was paying Stan the money and would hunt those people down. So it was confirmed. All right, Anne, you have to be paper. You sent your letters to began to topple Stan's empire. I went to Anne and put my hands up. Do you trust me? Anne smiled with tears in her eyes, presumably because she knew I had my answer right. With one of her hands tied to the chair and the other tied down at the elbow, we played the game. Together we chanted, Rock, paper, scissors, shoot! On the exclamation point, I struck my fist open. I struck my fist into an open palm. Rock. What? Oh, his hand was into his open palm.
yes.
With a rock.
Are you sure you wrote this?
Oh my gosh. I don't know,
Are
guys.
you sure you wrote this story?
Who really remembers? Anne flattened her hand, palm down. Paper. An industrial strength alarm sounded and I shit my pants again. The clamp above Anne, holding the cinder block, slid back on a rail and dropped the block 10 feet behind her. Next was Timothy. I knelt down in front of him and pulled the bloody 8-ball out of my pocket. I know Stan hit you in the head with this glorified rock, Tim. Why? Tim cracked a smile. I was late on a shipment. Stan was so temperamental. I smiled with him and explained, Your hobby was just to throw me off. Whoever has done this to you all knows every detail as to how this murder happened, and I will find out after I save you. You were assigned rock, so let's play for your freedom. I held up my hand to his half-restrained one, and we played. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot! My fist struck my palm, index and middle finger extended into the classic scissors position. Tim kept his fist tight. His rock crushed me, like what the cinder block could do to Tim's head. Instead, the industrial alarm sounded again. The clamp slid back and released the block onto the floor behind him. My job wasn't done yet, though. I stood between Craggley and Dion and decided to think out loud. There are two options left, scissors and shoot. Craggley, you have had extensive experience as a marksman in the Army, but Dion, working with the FBI, you could have access to guns and gun training depending on the full scope of your position. And even if you don't, it's not hard to learn how to use a handgun on your own. I had originally thought Anne was rock because she was covered in diamonds, and that you, Dion, were paper because of your paperwork. But seeing as she is paper and Tim is rock, it's clear to me that Craggley has to be scissors for his time as a Black Knight in Britain. Craggley never used a gun outside of his service time. I knelt in front of Craggley and began the game. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot! I flattened my hand, palm down. Craggley flashed scissors, slicing me like he did those poor bastards on the streets of Soho. The alarm sounded and the cinder block rolled back. And released, which left shaky old Dion. The omnipotent voice crackled above and spoke.
Congratulations, Connolly. You found the killer, the mustard man, Dion. But do you know why he decided to commit murder?
Truly, I didn't, but I made my best guess. Dion snorted all of your cocaine. The cocaine that was supposed to arrive, that Tim was supposed to distribute. He was so high he didn't realize Ann's treason letters caused him to be late because half his shipments never showed up. Ann's treason also made a paranoid and coked out Dion think that Stan's empire was over and he wanted out. But in his coked brain, he couldn't find a way out, so instead he decided to double-cross Stan and tell the FBI all about his operations in return for protection. Boom, bitches, I am on fire! I was ecstatic until the voice came on and corrected me slightly.
No, I mean, yes, but just not the cocaine part. Dion didn't do cocaine. He was just paranoid. Why did you add that part?
I shrugged. I don't know, it just seemed right to me. The voice seemed disappointed in me. He reminded me of father.
You have earned the right to know the full truth.
The doors that were locked opened, and I turned around and saw a man in a white suit and a blood stain down his shirt. His brownish ginger hair reminded me of my childhood trauma. I couldn't tell you why. Dion gasped, "Holy shit, it's Daniel!" Stan stopped 10 feet away from me and began talking. Dion is not the only FBI informant I have control over. He has always been flaky, and I had a long list of people not to trust once fractures started to form in my business. I knew he would turn on me, so like I do with my other my untrustworthy employees, I invited him here to question his loyalty. I didn't know he would attempt to kill me, though. Stan walked over to Cragley and began to loosen his restraints. I love that billiards room, and one night, while high on my cocaine, I came in to play a game. I danced around the room and knocked everything over, including a picture of Hitler's wife. From behind the picture hid a gun, which fell out. Stan finished freeing Cragley and moved on to Anne. I didn't know who put the gun there, when the attempt on my life would take place, where it would be, or anything. I do nothing, but I had to be prepared. In my rage, I decided I wanted my murderer to feel intense fear, so I hatched this plan. I wore a squib and had pellets of fake blood in my pockets that I could pop against myself at any moment. I replaced the gun's bullets with blanks and hid it behind the picture. There was a good chance that my attempt to make my killer think that they won would fail, but I would still try. I wasn't expecting him to go for the kill the next night, however. It helped that it was in the dark so that no one could see how fake it looked. Stan then went to release Timothy from his chair. Berthrew has been with me since I was a child. I knew he would not attempt to kill me, so I told him my plan. He followed me at a safe distance with a gun just in case. He knew that if I were to die, he would have to try and cover me up so that no one would inspect my body. That is why you could not inspect me after I had supposedly died, Detective Connolly. Berthrew also recruited our other house servants to bring the suspects here. With Timothy free, I was surprised to see Stan start on Dion's restraints. To truly find out who had attempted to kill me, I hid trail cams in every corner of the house, including in the eye of the deer in the billiards room. After my quote-unquote death, Berthrew retrieved the camera and brought it to me, which showed Dion sneaking across the room and shooting me in the back. With Dion free, Stan took his place in Dion's chair, which still had the last cinder block hanging over it. You must know, Detective, that my life is very stressful. The pain I inflicted on these four was because they were all guilty of something. Cragley killed my UK dealers. Anne ratted me out just as Dion did, and Tim is just incompetent. He represents all of my useless followers across the continent. All of them deserve to be gunned down. However, in my declining age, well, actually not declining, it's rather rampant, I have decided to step down from my position. I have caused much pain and death. It is time I gain a taste of my own medicine. From his pocket, within his jacket, he pulled out a device with 4 buttons on 4 corresponding lights. 3 lights were red and 1 was green. He placed his thumb on the green lighted button. Sitting in Dion's chair with the cinder block hanging over his head, Staniel played with the little green lit button on his device. "Wait, no!" I screamed. "You have AIDS! You'll give it to us if you splatter us!" Stan rubbed his eyes. "No, I don't have AIDS. Bertha just said that so you wouldn't touch the fake blood on the table and find out it wasn't real." I sagged. "Oh, well, never mind. You can continue then." Staniel chuckled. "Au revoir, Detective." He clicked his little green button. The industrial alarm sounded for the last time. Yeah, the stomped juice box was a good analogy for what happened next. Well, fellas, thank you for listening to me struggle through that.
I got it right.
You got it right.
You tried to talk me out of it, too. You're like, well, what about Anne? She hated drug dealers.
Truthfully, that was because I had to remember some of the evidence, and I was remembering it as you were guessing. Like, I kind of forgot that Anne was covered in rocks.
Yes.
I probably should have written the deliberation a little bit different, because I think I meant to include why. Because, like, Ann Toller says she's the bling-loving accountant, and the bling was supposed to be diamonds, rocks. She loves rocks.
Yeah.
And she's also sending out letters.
Yeah.
And Cragley, was supposed to be the gun and the knife. Dion was supposed to be the papers, because he's doing a bunch of paperwork. And Timothy, I don't know what the hell I was going to have Timothy be.
Well, I mean, the obvious thing was shoot.
Yeah, his was
the
shoot.
The other one was rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah. So, anyway, I basically had it so that there were two possible arrays of who everyone could be.
Yeah, I really was just focusing on more who had the motive and stuff to shoot him, even though I still don't think that Anne really did. But
yeah, well, her motive in the end wasn't, like, revealed there.
No. You want to tell us about the game, Rock, Paper, Scissors?
Here's some information on Rock, Paper, Scissors, or RPS. It comes from the World Rock, Paper, Scissors Association, the WRPSA. From the original, no, you gotta read it. Okay. It's not working. I've hit my limit.
He's hit his limits on words. Here, have some more water.
Oh, thanks.
From the official history of the RPS, we learned that the game was originally mentioned in a Chinese book written during the Ming Dynasty, which is a period of 206 BC to 220 AD. Wow, that is an old game. The hand game was created in China and traveled to Japan, where it gained popularity. One version used a frog, the thumb, who was defeated by the slug, the pinky finger, who was defeated by the snake, the index finger, who completed the circle by losing to the frog.
Nifty.
I don't know. That's a lot of fingers. One, two.
You can flip off your friends.
I guess.
Snake.
I'm not sure if they tap their hand like we do.
Probably not.
In the 17th century, the familiar rock, paper, scissors were incorporated and the game grew in popularity. By the early 20th century, the game had spread wider, including to the U.S. The history names of RPS in Chinese and Japanese we have no chance of pronouncing those. So we both encourage you to check out the WRPSA website and maybe sign yourself up to be a player. It's pretty cool that we learn these games and then there's like whole associations and tournaments for them.
I mean, I'm personally surprised someone can take rock, paper, scissors. I don't know. I feel like some people got some weird obsessions, and like that's got to be one of them. I imagine there's a lot of money being placed on rock, paper, scissors. I got $4,000 on that guy to play rock. His scissors, I lose it all. The wife, the kids, the dog, the bunny, the parakeet. Anyway, so now let's talk about me, because I'm pretty cool, right? So Jack is half the brain power behind Mysteries to Die For. Now finishing its seventh season, Jack writes and performs the musical arrangements and produces the show. He also maintains the show's fresh air by staunchly refusing to edit out his mother's mistakes, no matter how much she begs. It sounds weird when you say it like that. Jack attends Ball State University, majoring in media production with a minor in music theory, which everyone knows is harder than rocket science.
But your minor's not in music theory anymore.
Oh yeah, it's not. I just got read it. Believed it. Thanks for catching that. My minor is in music recording, not music theory.
But it has a lot of music theory in it.
It does. Yeah. Also, so I go to Ball State, so you can just have my home address at this point. How about you come and, I don't know, murder me and my family?
How about visit?
Really? You want to visit me? You want to come down to Muncie and visit me?
As opposed to murder.
I feel like that's the more realistic conclusion. Let's wrap up this episode. So that wraps up the episode of Mysteries to Die For. Support our show by subscribing, telling a mystery lover about us, and giving us a 5-star review. Check out our why am I still in the southern accent? Check out our website, tgwolff.com/podcast, for links to this season's authors. Mysteries to Die For is hosted by TG Wolff and Jack Wolff. Rock, Paper, Scissors, Shoot was written by Jack Wolff. Music and production are by Jack Wolff. Episode art is by TG Wolff. Join us next week for a toe tag, which is the first chapter from a fresh release in the mystery, crime, or thriller genre. Then come back in 2 weeks for our last story of the season. It's an adaptation of the 1927 Murder in the Maze by J.J. Connington. I haven't figured out the title yet. Well, you haven't figured out the title yet.
I have not figured out the title yet.
I wasn't supposed to read that.
Well, I wasn't sure who was going to read it. It might be called something like An Amazing Death.
You can't name it that.
No.
No.
It will not be called
No.
an amazing death.
And at this point, you can scroll down and realize that we did call it an amazing death.
I didn't write anything. I just said.
I know, but to listeners who watch this in the future, you have about 2 weeks, listeners, for this episode to be relevant, and then it's completely out of date, and everything makes no sense again.
Which means I have 13 days to write it.
Yep, we have 13 days to do all of the production.
All of the
The
production.
full production.
That's all.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for listening, folks. We'll see you next week for a toe tag. 2 weeks for amazing death or whatever the hell it's going to be. Thank you.
All right, Future Jack, take us out.
I'm going to edit me doing that out.
No, you're not allowed to edit that.
I-
You don't edit my mistakes. You can't edit yours.